speaking. Philip Schoolman, broker and owner of REMAX, is here.
And of course, he's already here at the building. We're looking at South Africa's industrial property sector. Apparently, it was actually the star performer in the Morgan Stanley Capital International SA Annual Property Index for the year ending December 2024, with a total return of 15.2%. Now, we're talking about this industry and the opportunities you can find as a property investor. That's the industrial property sector, right?
Right, Philip, good morning. Welcome to Cape and Breakfast.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me.
Right, before we, delve too much into this, let's talk about, industrial property. What are we talking about, just briefly?
Okay, so it's warehousing mostly. So you find a couple of sectors: retail, which is your shop fronts, your malls, your commercial, which would be office parks, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And then industrial being warehousing, and then residential obviously is housing.
Like your storage things and
storage could also be seen as light industrial.
Okay, okay,
Up to heavy industrial, meaning manufacturing.
Okay.
So it's from storage to manufacturing. It's both sectors are
All right, clear. Apparently there's industrial property sector is actually flourishing. But let's look at contributing factors.
So I think we need to consider what the landscape was like in the 90s and 2000s. It was genuinely not a sector that everybody could delve into or touch even.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your barriers to entry were too high, and you found that large institutions owned a lot of the properties, like your Millman groups.
Yes.
They owned the majority of the sector. So the economic landscape has changed quite a bit since COVID in the late 2020s, and this is where we find ourselves now. So a lot of these large institutions have started offloading some of their older, industrial properties, and you found that some people in the private sector have started either buying their own building from these large institutional guys, or because of this offloading, you also found that it opened a gap for investors to open up into, because to construct will always be more expensive than to buy existing. I think what started happening in the last 3-4 years is there's actually a movement, a market started forming, which didn't exist before, because these guys usually rented themselves. They had an office of ladies that would manage the rentals for them. Because of the market forming, the need for real estate agents to start working in commercial increased quite a bit. It exploded in the last couple of years. There's a big focus, even from REMAX SA, on commercial properties. We ourselves started doing commercial heavily because the market formed. Previously, it was very hard for a real estate agent to even enter there. The guys all knew each other.
Because from what you're saying, so this would be the very same space. Say, for example, in Limpopo, where you'd find like government offices, government rentals, so like the office space kind of, like if there are buildings and those kind of things.
Yeah, so government is a cookie on its own. Government's even struggling to find space that are suited to their requirements. You find in most cases you've got to build for government, and in the 90s that happened. They were incentivized to build buildings for government. That's not happening anymore. So now,
you get a Philip who has a property or a building in town, and then the rents out to a certain department, for example.
Yeah, so you would build it to spec. Currently, if you have a building, you would tender for that building, because your building suits the spec of the government, and then you would win the tender and then place them. But here's the caveat: there's only one building that exists. I mean, I showed a government apartment 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
There's only 2 options.
Sure.
And none of them really suits anyway, because there's too few parkings. But I think that the big thing also with this movement created is a lot of, because of logistical costs, oil prices increasing, the economy slowing down to a certain extent, online shopping booming, e-commerce is booming, so that increases the need for warehouse space in local distribution centers. But now we also have large companies like Amazon, Take-A-Lot, which could potentially hurt our industrial market. So there's a lot of volatility here. I mean, if the dollar goes down 1 basis point, 100 people lose their jobs. And the first sector that's going to be affected is industrial. It's like the primary primêre bedrywighede in Afrikaans, primary,
Okay, you lost me
primary,
there.
secondary, and tertiary
Ah.
economic activities. So industrial is right at the bottom.
Sure.
Or it's the first tier that gets affected. Also, a lot of people have started doing illegal land use. They've set up warehousing on their plots, close to roads.
Sure.
So it's a
Yes.
very big topic to be discussed. There's many different reasons, and I think further research should be put into this. I think everybody's got to form their own opinion, or they can come and see us.
Tell me, then how does a property investor take advantage of this, like something that's on the rise? We'll get into that. We're just going to take a short break and then maybe think about that a bit, Philip, on how does the property investor take advantage of this. So as you wrap up, Philip, you were saying, how does the property investor take advantage of this on the rise?
Okay, so it's still a sector in the market that needs a seasoned investor. It's not something that you're going to start if you just got a job. I would seriously try and get you away from investing into industrial or commercial or retail if you are not if you haven't invested into property before and built up your equity, because this is still a tough market to enter. And one of the things we must realize is that it's still expensive in terms of deposits. And it's also risk, because let's say you've had a 5-year rental agreement, you're probably going to be empty for about 6 months to a year before you place a new tenant. The setup costs are expensive. So I wouldn't say that this is necessarily for everyone, but the opportunities that can happen is you could pool together in a syndicate, maybe 5 or 6 people, and they together collectively buy a warehouse and rent it out in a public entity, because then you can also not a public entity, man, like a legal entity, a company. You can then take advantage of tax benefits. And the one thing that we need to realize about the industrial property sector as well is that it usually, or 90% of the time, the buyers can purchase a property that is cash flow flush. It's positive. So let's say your bond would be 100,000 a month, but it generates 120, 130, which is very rare to find in any other sector.
Okay, we're going to leave our conversation here for today. Hope that was helpful. Broker and owner of REMAX, Philip Skuman.
Do you thought that?